All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Central Park. I can't see my face on the screen yet. Is this working? Yes. Okay. Here we are. I just wanted to make sure you could all see me. Welcome to Central Park, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another weekly walk. It is maybe the warmest day of the year so far here in New York. It's supposed to get nearly 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm so excited to be broadcasting to you from the park. If you don't know me, my name is Ian. I work for the Central Park Conservancy, and we're the nonprofit that takes care of Central Park. We know that getting to the park right now is not possible for many people, so we're bringing the park to you. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We do these weekly walks every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll have to use your imagination a little bit to join me as we jump into the park. And these walks are about 15 minutes. Once I get through the housekeeping, it will be about 15 minutes. And you'll see photos that were all taken by myself just a few days ago. And I apologize, the day I took these earlier this week, it was a little overcast. So it's still very beautiful, but you'll have to imagine it's a bright, sunny day today. And this day actually is a special anniversary, April 28th. April 28th, 2021 marks the 163rd anniversary of the Greensward Plan winning the design competition that determined what Central Park would look like. So this design was chosen on this date 163 years ago, and it guided and created the park that we love today. So I decided to visit this small flower bed, the Olmsted Flower Bed. It was difficult to decide what would be an appropriate place for this great anniversary, and I figured why not go to a flower bed that commemorates one of the designers who created the Greensward Plan. It's a small little garden, but a great place to meditate on this anniversary. And I also just want to give a quick shout out to us, the people who make these, and all of you who make these programs what it is by contributing, by saying hello, and by supporting us. This is a 1-year anniversary for us as well. Tomorrow, April 29th, would mark the first time we did this a year ago. So really so excited that we're continuing to do this, and we're so excited that you all continue to tune in. We have over 400 people visiting us today, so we're very grateful for that. And there's another anniversary I'll get to later on as well. I've already spent enough time on the first slide, so let's keep moving. Our mission statement is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. So we hope that this walk is a nice break in the middle of your day, and we hope that if you come to the park frequently, these walks add some level of enjoyment to the park you already get to experience. And if you never come to Central Park, well, and you live far away, I hope that this gives you the feeling that you're in the park and that you are enjoying it. And the last thing before we get into the park, there are some features you can use. There's a chat feature on Zoom and the control bar you can use to say hello. I see we have people from all over the United States. I also saw some messages from Argentina and Italy, so welcome wherever you're tuning in from. And there's also a Q&A feature you can use to say hello, or to ask questions rather, to Juan and Jose on the back end. And there will also be a poll that pops up on your screen. Look out in the chat because there's a few upcoming programs. There's a tree walk I'm hosting tomorrow, 3 p.m. And then there's also a virtual tour next Tuesday, which is like a longer program that goes into a bit more detail than this one. That's next Tuesday, so look out for those. We've spent long enough on these slides, so let's get into the park. Here's the rectangle that we know and love on the left, and a smaller rectangle, this blue one, outlines where we'll be walking today, which is around the southern end of the park. You'll recognize a lot of these names. Some of the most famous landscapes in the park are located around this region of the park, and we'll be entering on West 66th Street and walking east around Sheep Meadow until we get to this little oval. You'll see this little green oval at the bottom of the mall. Well, that is the Olmsted Flower Bed. And we're just gonna take a nice casual walk and go check that out. And here is this greensward plan that I was referencing earlier. This is the anniversary that we're celebrating today. I think it's as good a day as any to celebrate Central Park's birthday in a sense. And you might be wondering, what is greensward? I used to think it was greens ward, like a greens district, but it's actually greensward. Sward is an English word that basically means like a turf field or a lawn. So it's basically green lawn, if you will, but it sounds a lot fancier. But it beautifully captures what the designers of the park wanted to convey, which is just this tranquil, pastoral park for you to enjoy in the middle of a big city. And it would be impossible for me to go into too much detail about this because we have a short period of time, and this deserves hours of discussion. But really, this is a special plan for a number of reasons. I mean, this document is huge. You might not be able to tell it looks a little tattered in this image of it. It's a 9.5 foot long piece of paper and 2.5 feet wide. So it's this huge piece of paper, and the design itself is notable. You could probably talk about this for hours, like I said, about why it was chosen and what makes it special. But I think a few points I would highlight are, for one, its emphasis on the naturalistic, or the things that resemble nature. That comes before anything else. So before architecture, nature was emphasized. There is a great variety of landscapes. The designers wanted to avoid monotony and have you want to explore more, because there's something new to see around every corner. And then also the fact that the design encourages a single park with a unified experience. What does that mean? Well, you can walk from 59th Street in the south to 110th Street without having to cross the street. And this is aided by the ingenious design of putting the transverse roads, or the roads that go from the east side of Manhattan to the west side of Manhattan. They go underneath the park. So there's bridges over these so that you never have to worry about crossing a highway. And they didn't even have cars when they designed this. So it's a very prescient design, I believe. So those are some of the reasons why I think this is a great design that deserves to be celebrated. And it's worth noting that there was a competition. There was a competition when they set aside this long rectangle of space to become a park. And this could have become any number of things. You know, there were all sorts of designs. I mean, this could have been a very different space, and this is what we got. And I think we are very lucky, because I consider it, and many people consider it, a masterpiece. And last bit of history here. Here are the two men who designed the greensward plan. Calvert Vaux is on the left of your screen. He was a British architect, and Frederick Law Olmsted on the right. Could go on about these two as well. And it also was Frederick Law Olmsted's birthday on Monday, April 26th. We'll be celebrating that at the end when we get to the flower bed. But I think these two were very principled people who had a vision for the park and really advocated for that vision. They had to compromise at many points, and the park reflects that. But I think, owe a great deal to these two. And I also wanted to read a quote from one of their competitors who lost, Charles Follen. He lost this competition. And a month afterwards, there's a good quote from him. He said, "I have not much faith in the individual theory as applied to architecture and landscape gardening. The greatest works of art have been produced by many unknown hands." So I think he's thinking of like great cathedrals in Europe that took hundreds of years to build. It's kind of, he thinks that the park is similar to those cathedrals, and that thousands of people are going to contribute to this. And the reason why I bring this up is because I want to recognize these two men who I think it's fair to call geniuses in the at least in the extent that they impacted American cities and the design of parks, and I'm so grateful for them. I also want to recognize that at the time, thousands of people built Central Park, and in the 160 years that have passed, millions of people have visited the park and made it this beautiful place that it is, and people continue to work on it today. So I think that is the beauty of Central Park. It's a great design by these two, but it's also the fruit of the labor of countless people, and the people who visit the park and make it and like add to the culture of this being a wonderful place. That is the longest intro of all time. We're finally here. I have a feeling this is going to go over 15 minutes today. We are entering the park here on Central Park West. and we are transported from the urban to this beautiful green, yellow-green tree line here, and we'll walk down this path. And I think as we walk through, I just want to reflect on some of the design features of the Greensward plan. Like, for example, these bridges that take cars today over the pedestrian paths. This wasn't actually an original bridge in the Greensward plan. It was added in the 20th century, but they basically borrowed the design concept, both the visual aesthetic of it and the function that it accomplishes. And so I think it's fair to say this is in the tradition of Fox's design. And the other beautiful thing that this does is that it not only has the function, right, of moving the vehicles over your head, it also allows the visitors to feel like they're being transported through this portal, this gateway into this thing that is very different than the city, this green park. And there's a psychological experience that happens when you go through underneath one of these arches and bridges. And there are also plantings along the side of this overpass. This is probably the most beautiful overpass you've ever seen. It plants out the cars and the noises. It's very deliberately done to make sure that the visitor has a pleasant experience in the park and they can feel like they are away from the city for at least a little while. And as we walk into the park, we'll get to the East Drive, where today bicyclists and joggers and walkers pass by. We'll go across the crosswalk, and here we are. We're gonna be at the base of Sheep Meadow here. And Sheep Meadow is a nice place to reflect because here it is, this big lawn. I think it captures both the spirit of the green sward, right? This green expanse of space. It also represents a compromise that had to be made, or rather a requirement laid out for the designers. The board of commissioners that was overseeing this project said that there had to be XYZ things. There were some requirements, and one of them was a large parade ground for like military exercises. This was never actually used for that. However, it was incorporated into the design. So I think this represents both something that was required of them because they were designers, they weren't the dictators of the park, but they made it in their vision and they made it this beautiful green expanse. And I think that to many people, it seems very obvious you put a lawn in a park, right? Except that this represents both, well, a deliberate plan in the sense that this was a rocky area that required blasting with gunpowder in order to level it, and then bringing in all this soil to make it this lawn. So it's anything but simple, really. Or maybe it is simple, but it was anything but obvious and easy to do. It required a lot of resources. And so this is really the idea, is to have these expanses, these wide open spaces that provide a contrast to the confines of the crowded city. And across from Sheep Meadow is Tavern on the Green. It's a famous restaurant. Originally, it was a sheepfold, so the sheep that acted as the lawnmowers on Sheep Meadow lived here, but now it's a restaurant. So I think this represents to me how sensibilities change, the city changes, the world changes, and luckily a lot of the building remains. It's a beautiful building. But I don't think, I think the designers had a vision for the park that they really advocated for, and I think we're lucky we preserved a lot of that. But culture changes, and well, here's a picture of the sheep. It's pretty cool from on Sheep Meadow. They really would graze here for decades until the 1930s when the restaurant was created. But what I was saying before was that I think it's beautiful how. Well, I think it's always a balance, right? Like everyone's gonna have a different opinion on what the park should be used for, and it's about that balance. And today, like I got a picture of the marathon that you can see Tavern on the Green on the right here, and we're by the trees on the left as we're walking by. There were no marathons being run in New York in the 1850s, right? So the designers didn't think about this space being used for that. But it is today. I think it's a New York institution at this point that I think it's fair to say a lot of people really like. And so the park isn't static, but a lot of the design has been retained, and I think to our benefit because it's a brilliant design. But there's new things. People's taste changes, and new activities are born, and I think it's cool how the park is dynamic and impacted by every generation. And we'll move by the lawn again. And you know what? I didn't get a close look at this tree, so I actually don't have an idea on what this tree is. So I'm sure someone knows because it's a famous tree in the middle of the lawn that I should really know, but I thought it was amazing, just the profile of this tree, the way that the branches grow out because it gets full sun. It's not competing with any other tree. So it has these beautiful branches that grow low to the ground, and it really stands out as an ornament on the lawn, I think. And we'll get another view of Sheep Meadow as we walk around the northern end of it, and you'll see, well, the timeless, the trees and the lawn that have stood the test of time, whereas the city landscape has developed tremendously behind it, right? And this is another thing that the designers, well, they knew that the city was growing northwards. It's one of the reasons why the park was built here, but I don't think they could have ever anticipated this. But nevertheless, I think that if anything, this makes their design even more important because they wanted to provide a place that was a rest from the city. And I think it just shows that they had the right idea in mind, and that they were really, they made a great judgment for the future by creating this space, and that's probably needed more than ever today. And on the north side of Sheep Meadow, there's also this building here called Mineral Springs. It's a cafe now. I'm pretty sure it's still closed because of the pandemic. But it's a nice building. This is a 20th century building, actually. A lot of the red brick buildings, you can tell that's a telltale sign of some of the mid 20th century buildings in the park. It's pretty nice though. I've never stopped to look at it really until now because whatever, I would just pass by it. But I think it's got a character and it fits in between these trees nicely. However, in the original design, in the greensward plan, the architecture tended to be a bit more ornate. And here's an example. This building stood in this space. It was called the Spa at the time. We call it Mineral Springs today. But it served a similar function. It was for refreshments. And the designers, they were designing this for people. And so the visitor experience was something that was an integral part of the design. And so these kind of bits of architecture were important. And although the landscapes were emphasized above all else, I think the buildings like this weren't meant to overpower the landscapes, but complement them. So yeah, very cool building there. And as we head towards the flower bed, we're going to go past Sheep Meadow. You can see us here. We're going to go down this walk here, which is known as the Nelsinger Lilac Walk. And we will end up above this little oval in just a few minutes. And here is the Nelsinger Lilac Walk, which was the result of a gift in 1970. And these beautiful lilac trees were replanted in the early 1990s. They're doing really great. Here's one lilac. And here's a pink variety. And I wanted to ask you all, I'm going to launch a poll that will pop up on your screen just to see if you have any favorite flowering plants, no matter where you are in the world. If you're in Central Park, that's great. And if you can't make it to Central Park, I'm sure there are beautiful plants around you. So I picked some of them that I really like this year that are prominent in Central Park. But of course, I could only list a few, and there's hundreds of flowering plants here. So please let me know what you think, and I will share those results momentarily. I just want to keep it moving as it seems I'm already going over time. And as we near the flower bed, we'll see another addition to the park, right? This is not part of the greensward plan. We have the greensward plan all around this area, right? We have these trees and these lawns, but things have changed. This road was actually added in the 20th century to accommodate cars, unfortunately. But today it's been repurposed a little bit. There's a beach volleyball court in the park, and this is something Olmsted and Phlox, I'm sure they never pictured people playing beach volleyball in the middle of their park, but I like it personally. I do, because I think that I was walking by here and I heard these people talking, and I think a few of them were less familiar with the city, so the people they were playing with were giving them tips about places to go and things like that. And I think it's really nice in that, I think they had the vision, the creators of the park had the vision that this would be a place where people could come and be friendly with one another and maybe act a little bit differently than you do when you're in a rush to get your groceries or go to work and meet your fellow citizens. And I think I think it's important because it is a democratic space that people have different opinions about things that were added later on. It's important too, but at the same time, I don't know. I like to think that in these areas that the designers might smile and appreciate that things, yes, have changed, but at least the park is being used for that same purpose that they envisioned. anyway, that's my editorializing, but personally, I'm okay with some of these changes. And the last thing we'll see before we get to the flower bed is this statue. I highlight, this is one of the best statues in the park, in my opinion, Indian Hunter by John Quincy Adams Ward. I think both the characters in this they have so much personality, and the movement is brilliant. And it's funny because this is another thing I really like in the park, but this is something that the designers didn't really incorporate in the Greensward plan. They didn't really want a lot of artwork or sculptures in the park because they felt that it took away from the feeling that you were in nature. Once again, it was another compromise, and they're here. But personally, I think they add a weight of importance to this area, or it just feels like in this formal area that it's a special place. And I feel like I maybe highlighted less of the Greensward plan and more of the things that were forced into the park and that maybe against their wishes. But I think that that's the spirit of Central Park, and it being a democratic space that the whole city shaped, really. I mean, they did an amazing job making this park, but really the whole city had a hand in shaping what the park looked like. And we're finally at our titled destination, which is the Olmsted Flower Bed, this green circle at the base of the mall. And we'll look towards it here. You can see some statues around it. You can see some people walking around it. You'll see some green sward here, right? Some American elm trees, a nice lawn that Olmsted and Vox would like you to walk by and just contemplate things as you appreciate the beauty of nature. Or really beyond that, I think they felt that nature actually unlocked certain thought patterns or moods that you might not experience in the city. And here is the mall, which is this long open air hall of reception, this promenade here. I think before we get into the final stop, the garden, this is a good place to reflect on this design, this Greensward plan, because there were, like I said, there were so many different visions for what this space looked like, all radically different from one another, or many of them radically different from one another. And this quote from the authors of The Park and the People, which is a great book on Central Park by Elizabeth Blackmar and Roy Rosenzweig, they said, all agreed that Central Park must be beautiful, even magnificent, and it must measure up to European models as a worthy emblem of the city's progress. So even though there were all these different ideas of the park, everyone agreed this had to be a really good park to represent New York. And the expectations were very high. And I think looking at an image like this, I think it speaks for itself that they met those expectations. So that concludes that part of the tour. And now we're at the Olmsted Flower Bed. Here is Frederick Law Olmsted in an older age. And he was a Renaissance man, but he was a journalist as well. He tried his hands at a number of professions, but he's remembered as one of the most important landscape architects in American history. Built Central Park, he helped build Central Park as well as Prospect Park. Well, really parks all over the country, from Buffalo to Newburgh, New York, to Stanford University's campus, and parks in Montreal, so many different things, because this was really the beginning of his career, Central Park, and he went on to do many great things. And here is the flower bed that he was gifted on his 150th birthday in 1972. Here it is. I like this. There are flowers, there are rocks, there are shrubs, there are trees, there are lampposts. To me, this garden almost feels like a terrarium, or a place that you can come view all of the wonderful things there are to see in Central Park. Some might say it's ironic that this was his gift, as he wasn't like a huge gift of these super formal areas. You know, he kind of favored designing parks so that they looked naturally occurring. But I think it's nice. I mean, I think it looks great right now, and I think that it gives you a preview of each little component of the park. And I should note, I don't know if I said, but earlier this week was the 199th anniversary of his birth. So I'm excited to see what he'll get for his 200th anniversary next year, or at the very least, how we'll celebrate it. And this terribly grainy photo is something I found in the New York Times from that day in 1972, from April 26, 1972. And even though it's grainy, I had to share it because it's giant cake. You can see people in the back. They're standing around a giant cake for his 150th birthday. So he didn't just get the flower bed. He also got this cake made of bread, cream cheese, and green dyed cauliflower, which sounds pretty unappealing to me, but it must have been a fun celebration. And we're looking now at these tulips here in the garden, these layered plants here that provide these nice earth tones. There are bleeding hearts, this really interesting pink flower in the flower bed as well. There are azaleas, which I'm sure today are probably in full bloom, if not, they're almost there. And there are benches to sit around if you'd like to just sit here and contemplate the garden. I didn't share the results of the poll. I'm just realizing that, so I'll do that now while I'm thinking of that. It seems like everyone just likes them all. I think that's a great choice because they're all beautiful and they all add to the character of the park. So thank you all for sharing that. I hope that if you selected other, you shared that in the chat. And then the last few images we'll conclude on. Well, there's Shakespeare, there's William Shakespeare looking over the garden. And this is maybe a terrible bit of, I don't know, just some feeling that I had, and this isn't accurate at all. So John Quincy Adams Ward created the statue, and he very much intended this to be Shakespeare. But when I walk by, he's got this goatee that almost reminds me of Olmsted's facial hair, and he was bald as well. And I like to think that this is almost like Olmsted looking over his flower bed. This is not actually what this statue is supposed to represent. You know, we can recognize Shakespeare as well, but I like to think that when I'm walking by, that he's looking over his flower bed. And I wanted to end on this beautiful view because I think in this case, the flower bed ties in brilliant with the mall. This actually, when you stand behind it and you look north, it blocks out the path, the mall itself, and what you're left is this like really expansive view of these American elm trees, which were Olmsted's favorite tree. They were intentionally planted in this area because of the way that the branches wind and create this sense that almost like you're in a cathedral of nature is how I would describe it. Not the most eloquent description, but that's what it feels like. And we'll leave you on this. I hope you enjoyed this one. I know I went a little long, but I think it's appropriate for this anniversary. And I hope that we'll see you next week when we see the conservatory garden with Juan, which promises to be, well, it's very different than what we saw today because it is a very formal garden versus the naturalistic greensward plan that we saw. So thank you so much for joining us. Look out for those programs, as again, my colleagues will be dropping that in the chat. And you can also stay connected with us on social media. You can see on our screen, we're Central Park NYC on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then you can also go to our website and check out everything that we have coming up, centralparknyc.org/mycentralpark. Thank you again for joining us. I'm really, really sincerely, I'm amazed that so many of you want to tune in every week and hear us talk about this park. It's like the best job in the world. So we really appreciate you supporting us, and I hope that we'll continue to see you for a long time as we continue to do these programs. So we'll see you next week, and from the Conservancy, stay safe and be well.